welcome to this fast track session. Today we're going to be talking about data and sentiment for off-peak demand. And I am delighted to be joined by Hannah Babineau from our partners at the Data Appeal Company. So welcome, Hannah.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you back, as always. And we're going to be looking today at what drives travellers to choose Europe outside of the high season. Hannah's going to share some fresh insights into off-peak and low season demand, and we'll have a look at how sentiment and destination choice are evolving in these uncertain times across all the European destinations. So let's dive right in, and for you to kick us off, Hannah.
Perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, so really excited to chat today about not only some emerging destinations, but also some emerging trends that we're seeing with different markets and different times of year. And really kind of what we're seeing is demand is definitely shifting. But the nice thing is for, I'll say, us European destinations is it's not shifting away from Europe, but it's shifting within Europe. So there's some really nice opportunities, I think, for destinations and tour operators right now to take advantage of. So I'll kind of go through my slides, but we'll really explore where that demand is going, who these travelers are, and really what it means for a destination to become more, sustainable, more efficient with their growth. For those of you who might not know about Data Appeal and Mabrian, so we are one of the most comprehensive intelligent solutions really geared for tourism destinations, DMOs, tourism boards, ministries of tourism. Basically combining a whole slew of data from over 130 different sources. Really around the globe, we work with destinations in over 60 countries, monitoring 5,000 destinations worldwide. So for us, this is really our bread and butter to understand the dynamics of a destination, their visitors, what people like to do, and really seasonality. We basically focus on these kind of five main pillars, which include access and air connectivity, which is huge, especially for European destinations. And as we'll see kind of sneak peek, especially that long haul international market, flight data is really essential for to understand the trends, the demand in markets, of course, the sentiment and the experience, hence the name Appeal, kind of like Curb Appeal, understanding really what it is about the destinations themselves that are attracting these visitors, especially at different times of the year, getting away from the peak season, the supply and competitiveness of a territory against their competitors. And lastly, what's really important is, of course, the impact that's being left behind from visitors themselves, not only economically, what they're spending, but also socially, their experience, and sustainable as well. So really focusing today on seasonality. And I don't like the word over tourism. I always say unbalanced tourism. Just trying to have a more positive spin. But basically, we're going to look at a few different trends, and kind of the first half of what I'm looking at will come from kind of the extended EU 28. So basically, the European Union plus the UK, from some of these six kind of really key, most important overseas markets, kind of keeping Europe with kind of apart in terms of inter-Europe travel, really focusing on some of these more long-haul markets, including Australia, Canada, China, Japan, South Korea, and the US. So let's jump into it. Kind of before starting, just wanted to kind of get a pulse of, okay, what's happening right now in terms of air capacity. Basically, these are the top long haul markets, as I mentioned. The US market has a huge, huge share of that, with over 36 million, seats per year coming in to Europe. And these are with considering a direct flight from these markets into Europe. Huge growth of 5.2%. So demand definitely is not slowing down. You can see there's also a big jump recently with Australia. Obviously, given the current situation right now, that looks a little bit different. A lot of them might be rerouted through the Los Angeles, Seattle flight. We're seeing a lot more shifting happening, but they're definitely still coming to Europe. They're just typically avoiding some of the layovers in Dubai and Qatar for the time being. But they're definitely still coming, and there's still capacity that's really strong coming out of the Australian market.
Hannah,
And as yeah,
sorry, Hannah, I wonder if I could just jump in there before we move on to the next bits, because thinking about air capacity, um, obviously I know with the ongoing situation in the Middle East, the industry is able to reroute itself, like you mentioned, which is, your sort of first workaround, if you like. But I suppose I wonder if you're seeing anything or have any predictions around fuel shortage or price
Mhm.
increase, because clearly that is less easy to work around. And I just wondered if there was any sentiment. It's very difficult for people to predict, but whether you've heard anything.
Definitely, yeah. We're seeing, especially for some key markets, for example, Brazil, they've had to cancel so many of their flights because for them, Qatar Airways was a huge hub for them, maybe doing a layover in Europe before continuing into Doha. So there are some markets that have been really affected. Where I'll say the opportunity is, and because people still want to travel, the current situation is not stopping people. It's just, I'll say, rerouting them a little bit. I think there's a huge opportunity right now, especially within Europe, to get people to travel, across. So maybe more shorter haul flights. Of course, that might bring in maybe less the average length of stay, or kind of the average spend is a little bit less than focusing on some of these big historical markets. But the nice part is there's also opportunities for different types of people to target, whether that's business travelers, getting them to kind of extend their stay, focusing on that leisure aspect. We'll see also there's a huge growth in solo travel, which is great to see. So maybe that traditional, the family of four, family of five coming in from a long haul might not be as strong, but definitely opportunities elsewhere.
Oh, thank you.
So I'll say probably this comes as no surprise to anyone. So over a third of travelers are coming to these top 10 European destinations, and you can really see the region or the province and pinpoint the cities. So Rome, Paris, Florence, Sevilla, Barcelona, etc. So it really comes as no surprise. But basically, kind of what we're seeing is the growth. So where that kind of emerging is happening. So you can see there is, of course, strong growth year over year for the major cities. But something I was really excited about is to see kind of this off the beaten path. The growth for these destinations is incredible to see. And I was really excited to see that the top two were in southern Finland and Trentino in Italy, which is a region in the Alps, which are not destinations that have major cities. They're not destinations on the beach. These are hiking, these are, skiing, these are really mountain destinations for kind of winter activities, for outdoor activities. And this has been a trend that definitely was really strong in COVID, but we're seeing it hasn't left us yet. So it's actually picking up pace. As you can see here, the growth is really exciting. So I think being able to kind of shift away from, oh, these are our museums or these are our top attractions, and hey, get outside, experience the trail. That's something where the destinations that have some of this outdoor ambiance, let's say, are really growing and really doing well. So definitely, I won't go through all of them one by one, but really strong growth across some of these regions that I would definitely consider emerging and off the beaten path. And I think that's also thanks to travel. I know we talked about it's getting a little bit more expensive now with fuel, but it is a lot more accessible now than it was 20, 30 years ago. So a lot of kind of overseas travelers, it's not their first time in Europe. They've already seen the main sites. So they also, I'll say, don't have the FOMO if they are going maybe to a new destination and they're not seeing kind of that typical European itinerary that maybe, our parents, our grandparents were used to in the past.
I tell you what I think is interesting, actually, Hannah, about this is, um, we're talking here about sort of off the beaten path, but the connection between off the beaten path and off peak, because we can see obviously, we've spoken in other situations with you about kind of increase temperatures in southern Europe, etc. But the more strenuous outdoor activities, perhaps like hiking or cycling, actually lend themselves specifically to the shoulder season, don't they?
Exactly, exactly. And we'll kind of see later on, but the months that are doing amazing right now are April, May, and September, October, which is great because of course that means it's not as hot, so people have a better time. There's less people there. There's not crowds, long waiting times, and we've seen even sentiment increases during that because of course, maybe your hotel, concierge or when you're checking in, it's a faster experience, it's a more personalized experience. Same if you're doing a tour in a city, you have kind of these more moments that make the travel and make it a lot more personable and that you'll tell your family. So it's awesome to see with the sentiment increases as the seasonality balances out. So they're all really interlinked.
I think that's really interesting. I want to get onto that when you come onto the slide there, Hannah, because I think one of the things that Data Appeal is offering is this kind of sentiment analysis about how people are feeling. And I did see that people just generally prefer when they've gone in the off season. So yeah, let's crack on. Let's get there.
Exactly. No, I love it. And it happens every destination, everywhere around the world. As soon as we see seasonality at its highest, sentiment drops. It's always this inverse relationship. So I think kind of as you guys are doing a big focus on these, certainly you'll not get everyone who's coming in the summer to come just say in January, February, just because the nature of school holidays and things like that. But if we're really able to take advantage of the shoulder seasons, I think that's where really the best growth can happen for everyone. So we'll get into it, but definitely really just wanted to point out these destinations and really this growth of these kind of active experiences, outdoor tourism, getting a little bit more in nature and less the need to feel I need to go to the major cities, I need to go to the top museums, and that's kind of shifting away. Interestingly enough, I think influencer marketing is not the same as it was five years ago, 10 years ago. So I think these are all kind of happening kind of coincidentally. So let's talk about kind of the travelers, and I think the ones who are really able to, I'll say, experience these destinations in these shoulder seasons. Because of course, I think Europe, we have quite similar holiday structure. Most kids are in school during the same times of year, so it's hard to assume someone can, take their kids out in, the middle of March or February and go on a holiday. But I do like to see, especially we can start with the kind of the Anglo-Saxon markets here. They typically have the longest length of stay, and this is per destination because of course when they're able to come into Europe, they have a multi-destination itinerary. It makes sense once they're here. It's a lot easier to hop on maybe a shorter haul flight, a train, or even rent a car. So we can see these three markets do have the longest length of stay, and they typically travel as couples or as families. They typically do spend also a little bit more, usually prefer 4 or 5 star hotels. And you can see on that seasonality graph on the right-hand side, they look, I'll say, quite similar. Very strong May, June, another peak again, the highest peak actually, September, October. And they all dip down in August, which is, I'll say, great to see in terms of kind of avoiding this July, August, where things are hot, things are expensive. I'll say these tend to be going back to the sentiment, the markets that are most sensitive to air conditioning and things like that. So it's all kind of working together. But really exciting to see that they're already kind of spreading out. So not a lot of extra work needs to be done to convince them to come in the shoulder season. Flipping gears, I'll say from the Anglo-Saxon to kind of the key Asian markets here, you can see the length of stay is a little bit less, but still around that 2 day mark, which is great per destination. The biggest, I'll say, difference is in the solo travelers, especially for Japan and South Korea. They are, I'll say, the top overseas markets that travel individually, which is great because I think traditionally they were a lot more group reliant. I think also as kind of their middle class grows, they also are a lot more able and active and have that confidence to travel by themselves. In terms of category, quite similar, I'll say to the Anglo-Saxon, maybe a little more price sensitive, preferring that 3 star accommodation. Graphs, quite similar as well. There's always that little dip kind of in August, but you can see they're also tending to roll a little bit more in July. So I'll say these markets might be the ones I would focus on to move them back a little bit or get them into that September, October time. But again, their school year is a little bit different, and they also have different holidays with different vacation times. So it will look a little bit different for every country, but really just wanted to focus on the fact that they're very mobile, they're very experience driven. So they also are markets to focus on into some of these emerging destinations because a lot of them have already seen, as we saw on that first kind of list of destinations, the Romes, the Parises, the Londons, etc. of the world. So just some kind of high level key takeaways here. So of course, the overseas demand really shows kind of this lower seasonality dependence, which is great. And I think, nobody's kidding themselves if they think, okay, let's get all our travelers and we'll have an equal amount every month of the year. Unfortunately, unless you're a major city like a London or kind of these urban hubs, that's just really impractical. So kind of really finding a sweet spot in the shoulder seasons, especially spring and autumn. And really, I'd say the biggest focus that we're seeing in getting kind of these conversions is focusing on this nature and active tourism, which is great because I think being able to diversify what you offer will also set your destination apart from some of the others from that kind of classic itinerary. Of course, this is really helpful to reduce tourism pressure, and I'll go in just a second. And that doesn't mean if you are a major city or an urban city that there's not opportunity, because there definitely is in terms of diversification, distribution, and things like that. So really right now, I would say focus on the shoulder seasons and really focus on these experiences and how to get kind of people to enjoy these off the beaten track areas.
And I suppose as well, Hannah, just before we move on, it's success breeds success because we've seen people, if they come in this off-peak period, generally are very positive about their experience, more positive than in the high season, which then builds on that each time.
Exactly, exactly. And things are way cheaper typically in spring and autumn. So that might mean they have extra money to spend either while they're there or book a second vacation to that destination. So it does kind of have this ripple effect. Okay. So I want to now kind of focus on a couple key markets, as you can see, especially I'd say the destinations who are maybe suffering the most from these kind of high peak seasons, which are, as you can see, along the Mediterranean here. So these are the summer, the classic summertime, go to the beach destinations. So Italy, France, Spain, and Greece. Focusing on the inbound markets, we looked at all of Europe, the USA, and Canada specifically and wanted to kind of first zoom in on Spain at a macro level and then look to see a really nice use case at a micro level. So I'll say this, check the dates. It starts May 2024 to May 2025. It's not a January to December because I really wanted to highlight some of the trends here. So basically, this is showing the amount of reviews, social posts, and these digital traces which is a number that's very highly correlated to footfall, mobility, and the actual amount of people in the destination. You can see kind of these two lines here are nearly identical. We found that in terms of the total number of people within a destination and these digital traces, there's a correlation of about 97%. So this is data that you're able to get really in real time because as we know, sometimes the official statistic can take months and months and months to come in. So being able to have that real-time pulse of what's happening. And you can see based on this, there's already a huge peak here at the end of September, October, which is great. So we're seeing even in just the last 2, 3 years, that kind of October push, once you get a little bit more into the fall, has been really successful. And I think a lot of these destinations, going back to kind of that outdoor experience, are relying on things like maybe the wine harvest or the olive oil harvest, which is getting people outside, getting people a little bit later into the year, which is great. Same thing here. This is now just looking at Sevilla. And as we can see exactly what we are talking about before, this kind of light blue, I'll say the graph itself looks again at this amount of digital traces, while this kind of green teal line is the sentiment. You can see here when there are more people though in September, that sentiment does drop a little bit. So it doesn't mean that, okay, everyone comes in the shoulder season, all is well. No, destinations still need to understand, okay, there are maybe more people here now, which is great because they're not coming in August. So it's a better experience. However, we need to stay behind. We need to make sure there's, long lines, crowds, waiting times. The overall experience isn't feeling rushed. Visitors feel, like they're having a good experience. So it's not something that kind of dissipates and goes away. It's still something these local operators, tour guides, the restaurants, the hotels still need to take advantage of.
Yeah.
Quick use case, kind of coming back to Sevilla. So they basically kind of came to us saying, we have a lot of problems with overcrowding in the city center. A lot of people are unhappy with the waiting times to get into, it's usually those top 3, 4 attractions. They had access to the POI data, the sentiment, and we're just trying to understand what can we do without reinventing the wheel to move people kind of in time and in space. So what we were able to find was that kind of the popularity scores, which are a proxy for footfall and kind of mobility, were very low in kind of the suburbs. But the sentiment was very high, very, very high. People said, about the restaurants, these are some of the best restaurants. The prices are great. There's no crowds here. But what we found is the city hadn't really taken advantage of this, or they assumed that people wouldn't want to kind of go into the suburban areas, kind of the off the beaten track. So they added to their website more information about local bus routes, how to get maybe with the tram. So I only, a 20, 30 minute kind of bus ride out of the city center. But people, once they were, it's kind of those you don't know what you don't know situations. So once people were aware of this and kind of found these itineraries that were created for them, it was something that exploded. So kind of the result that we found over a year of kind of working on this activity is that the popularity was down in the city center. Sentiment finally was able to rise and stabilize. Popularity grew in some of these off the beaten path areas, and thankfully, because of this balance, the sentiment stayed really consistent. So the overall experience in the city, especially during kind of these, that traditional April to October timeframe, were very stable. So it's something a lot of destinations kind of need to take an audit or kind of look at how can the data I have access to meet what my goal is. Because I think sometimes, unfortunately, I think it's okay, we need to have this, and this data without the application. What can this serve me? What goal does this answer? How can I make this a lot more actionable? So in a lot of the cases, the destinations already have access to kind of some of the help that they need to be able to become more seasonable and a lot more balanced throughout the year.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, Hannah, because I was thinking from a destinations point of view. Um, Presumably these sort of trailblazers, if you like, who go off the beaten path and do these things, maybe they are sort of automatically predisposed to being happier because they're people who research properly and
Yeah.
do the things that they want. And they go, if I'm going to find the bus, I've bothered to do all this. I'm probably I've spent time going, I think I'm going to like this experience.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. I mean, we can only hope, but typically, yeah, I think well-researched travelers tend to, I'll say, have maybe higher expectations, but if they're kind of in charge of their own destiny, then we're seeing quite happy. It's typically maybe the ones that don't know what to expect and they might have complaints, especially, I mean, I live in Florence, which is a very, very, I'll say, touristy area in the summertime. And sometimes I read reviews on like the Uffizi Gallery and, oh, it was just so busy, I couldn't move. Okay, but that's not the fault. You also chose to go when it's busy. So I think, as you said, travelers also need to have a little introspection. And I mean, we're all guilty of it. I know when I go to the beach in the summer and I don't go out too early, I'm like, oh, there's nowhere to put, my beach chair. So I think it is something also visitors and travelers, we need to kind of look inwardly as well and not just place the blame on the destination and their promotion tactics.
Well,
But
yes, I mean, I think that goes back to what we were saying, wasn't it? That perhaps off-season travelers are more likely to maybe be more experienced travelers, perhaps,
exactly.
and people who are more predisposed to research properly.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think that's why we're seeing, especially sentiment from some of these Asian markets, really at its highest, is because I think a lot of these solo travelers can be very flexible, very adaptable. And if they see that something's not to their expectations, they'll pivot, they'll say, maybe I'll change my itinerary. Instead of doing this today, I'll do that. So I think having kind of this more adaptable traveler is also really helpful as well because they're able to be a little bit more creative in terms of what they're doing in a destination and not, okay, arrive at the museum at 10 a.m. when the line is already, down the street.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Jumping gears just a little bit, it's quite similar trends that we're seeing for US and Canadian travelers into France. Again, looking kind of at the sentiment and the digital traces line here. Same thing, as soon as we can see the max of people in the destination, sentiment does drop. Although I have to say, US and Canadian travelers on average are the most consistently with their sentiment scores. Maybe it's because they've seen it all, or they're maybe more traveled than some of the other international markets, or at least in Europe. So their expectations are, I'd say, quite on par with what actually happens for them. But sentiment, for at least for these two markets, is less impacted. But you can see a couple different drops in terms of peak season and the overall experience. Looking at Italy, a little bit different situation, kind of going back to this bell curve that we saw. The nice thing is because Italians basically take the whole month of August off. I think North American travelers have picked up on that, and we're seeing them kind of back off, put the brakes on for this July, August travel, focusing a lot more again on the September, October. This is really the sweet spot that we're seeing, and I don't know if it's because of maybe if kids are going back to school, parents can hold off a little bit or take kind of that first vacation of the school year. Because really there's not too many holidays in North America during the spring. So it's definitely something that is an investment. But we're seeing it's really paying off in terms of getting kind of travelers into this shoulder season here. And you're seeing really year after year, these trends are really consistent. So this is great. It's not something where we're just saying, okay, it happened last year. Hopefully it can happen again. This has already been going on for the last 4 years now. Looks a little bit different when we go to Athens, and I really wanted to highlight this because they are a city, of course, an urban city. I think we can call it that, but they also are quite unique in terms of what they offer in terms of the experience. You can see they're quite consistent again, pretty all between this early spring to end of autumn. Similar, their sentiment though is actually quite consistent year after year. There is a little bit of drop down with a sentiment score, but it is quite consistent. For them, it tends to kind of go up and down during really the holiday. And I kind of was looking in to see what it was that people were complaining about. And it's a lot of times like places closed. Oh, like didn't update their Google page or the TripAdvisor page, or oh, it was still showing open on Yelp. So I think this is something also destinations need to be mindful of. And certainly it comes down to the individual responsibility of, the restaurant or the attraction, the entertainment video venue. But really being able to be transparent to say, okay, yes, you can come in the off season, but know what to expect that maybe you won't get the same offer that you will if you come in springtime or in the summertime. So I think it also needs to kind of be looked in the mirror a little bit more in terms of, okay, yes, we want everyone to come when there's no tourists here, but are your operators also offering, do they have the same goals? So I think these are conversations that destinations and tour guides need to have with their local shareholders and stakeholders.
I mean, presumably that works well, though, Hannah, if the restaurants or services or whatever are used by the residents, because again, that
Hmm.
comes back to this whole key of resident tourist relationship. If it's already working for the residents and it's open for them, in some of these more off the beaten path places, that
Hmm.
might be the case because it's a restaurant that the normal people use. And I just wonder if maybe they might suffer a bit less with that than say the Costa del Sol, which is
Yeah.
a high season.
Exactly, exactly. No, but even here in Florence, which is, I'll say, definitely it's a big city. It's a small big city, but it's quite normal for us to have, maybe the gelaterias closed down or some of the really touristy restaurants closed down from January to March. And, we still have people come, oh, I traveled all the way. I wanted to try this. So it's definitely, for those listening, if you're on the destination or the tour operator side, before you promote certain places, make sure that they're open. If this is maybe some like an asset to the destination, definitely have those conversations, I think, with the operators because they might not understand maybe the real value that they have on this off season time frame for travelers.
Sure.
But yeah, just kind of wrapping up real quick since I know it's kind of one of the fast track and it's something Rachel and I could probably talk about for hours. Really, I think what we're seeing is this redistribution of demand, which can be across geographies, so new destinations within Europe, across seasonality, and then across the types of experiences. So what people are doing there, as we saw that outdoor tourism, the hiking, the cycling, skiing, snowshoeing is also something that's grown tenfold in the last few years, which is
Wow.
great to see. Yeah. Which maybe it's a safer. I think everyone, especially this summer with all the snow accidents, the skiing avalanches and everything, I think snowshoeing might be a little safer bet for the non-adventure seekers who want to get outside. But really, those are the three things: how to redistribute demand. But of course, that doesn't happen automatically. So destinations and tour operators really need to understand demand early. So leveraging this flight data, leveraging the sentiment data, who are the people that are willing to come? in the shoulder seasons and the off-peak seasons. When they're here, what do they like to do? Where do they like to go? And really position themselves around the experiences and not just, okay, the place, because maybe everyone wants to come here. Maybe not necessarily because, certainly I remember I went to Venice in the winter, which everyone's like, oh, there's not much to do. I had the best time, honestly, because I think I knew what to expect. That, okay, maybe places will be closed. It will be a lot calmer of an experience, but it was great. There was nobody there. Like it really felt like I had the city to myself. So it's really, I think,
Wow.
helping visitors understand what to expect when they're there in the off season.
Absolutely.
And then really, yeah, I think the target sentiment, like target those segments as we said. So it might not be your traditional family of four, might not be the couple, it might be these group travelers, it might be these solo travelers. So really, I think find a niche and go for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
So
I think we need to wrap up, Hannah.
yeah, I know we're getting there. So basically, yeah, I think this is obviously I love data. I come from the data background of this, so I think this is where data becomes critical, not understanding only where visitors go, but what they expect, what they like, what they dislike, and how that's evolving in real time because these shifts that we're seeing are definitely changing, and especially now with the current situation in the Middle East demand is only looking a lot more different, especially kind of from people coming in, not only from the Middle East, but people who might have a layover there. As we saw the Australian market, the New Zealand market really shifting how they're experiencing the destination. They tended to kind of start their journey maybe in Greece, work their way over. We're now seeing now they're coming maybe more through Paris, through London. So their itinerary is looking different. But basically, I think for me, this kind of shop, if you will, the shoulder and off peak season is really just the opportunity to make things less crowded, more enjoyable, more authentic, and a lot more sustainable, really, for everyone involved.
Absolutely. I think we can all say amen to that, Hannah.
Exactly.
Um, well, Hannah Babineau, thank you so much for joining us again. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. And we hope to see you all on the next Fast Track session. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Rachel.